Okay. Thank you, Antonia. Okay, I'm going to introduce Dr. Tirso Gonzalez. Dr. Gonzalez, he's a Peruvian Canadian of Aymara descent. He holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And after his postdoctoral studies at the University of California, Davis and UC Berkeley, he became Indigenous Studies professor at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, here in Canada. And currently he's research associate for the interculturality and environment, INTE, Pontificia Universidad Católica de Perú, and a member of the Universidad del Pacífico Ciencia Andina think tank group. Tirso also works as a scholar and activist on indigenous peoples and food issues, and has worked as a member of the IAA STD LAC team. His current research is on quote unquote buen vivir and good governance, intercultural management of the Andean Amazonian territory. And it's an honor to be sharing this space with Dr. Gonzalez, with Tirso. I'm gonna call him Tirso because I know him. And it's kind of like a full circle with Tirso as well, after we met here here in Toronto. And Tirso, I actually still have the piece of fabric that you gave to my daughter. We still use it here in the kitchen. Yeah. So we're always in good company and always remembering when we put that in the kitchen.
Thank you.
And today he's going to be talking to us about buen vivir, land, food, and all of those intersectionalities through his voice and through his experience. So we're on for a treat. So I'm going to be convocating the 7 teaching principles of the Anishinaabe people, particularly the one that has to do with respect. So I hope that everyone who is joining is able to join us and be present. So without further ado, Dr. Gonzalez, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Clelia. And
round of applause for Tirso.
Thank you. My gratitude to all of you for giving me this opportunity. I'm gonna share a screen so I can show you my PowerPoint. So I'm not good at these things, so bear with me because I don't know if I'm gonna do it well. Okay, can you see something? Yes, all right. And listening is good? Okay, well, basically, what I'm dealing with these days is about, as Clelia said, buen vivir, living well in English. And I put something that should be corrected, but is buen vivir, living well, is cultural affirmation in a context of cognitive, food, and climate change crisis. That is the context, right? In reality, Clelia put things right on target when she said, you know, that everything is related. And that is the way that most, if not all, indigenous cultures in the past and also in the present deal with the world. Everything is related. So, and the language and the philosophy and the epistemology and the ontology and the cosmology are interrelated in a unique way, which is in a drastic contrast with the Western modern way and with Western modernity too. So let's move on. This is just something that I wanted to share with you because the first time that I saw this picture, I thought that something was wrong. How can, a rock could be floating in the air? So, and it's just a matter of perception, right? Depending on where you direct your eyes, you will see things, and also, your five senses. So the solution for this is just to put the picture upside down, and because what you're watching is a reflection of, of the reality on the water. Um, Contextually, these days people are talking about decolonization more than ever, and disintegration of Western cognitive empire, especially rethinking sovereignty and territoriality in the 21st century. And this is an event that took place not so long ago. Other people, including, Chakanetsa Mabunga, a professor at Yale University, is talking about global South cosmologies and epistemologies. And my outline for today is divided in three sections: an intro, historical context and conceptual background; second, emerging Andean Amazonian matrix paradigm, older than, most uh, uh, recent paradigms, and a more coherent one, culturally appropriate, endogenous, and resulting from an autonomous endogenous development among all the regional local cultures that unfolded in what today is the Peruvian territory, the Andes. So there are, cumulative local experiences, that have been on trial for at least 5,000 years. And then we will get into some lessons and implications. You have a picture there, and, basically it is illustrating that we are closely related to Mother Earth, to nature. Part one, uh, past and present historical and conceptual context, crisis of Western civilization, climate change and climate crisis. Keywords: buen vivir, in Quechua Sumas Causai, in Aymara Suma Camaña, or living well. No? This, another keyword is colonial designs, especially when we deal with agriculture, with food, with the land, with indigenous peoples rooted in the countryside. Colonial designs have been not propitious for the strengthening and the nurturing of local indigenous cultures. So that's why people, within academia and outside academia are talking about decolonization, decoloniality. Cosmology, it has to be under review. Cosmovision 2, the science, development, modernity are under, a close eye, and seeing, the pros and cons of, applying development, modernity from above. Okay, and genealogies of knowledge, it's important these days. This table, I'm not gonna go into detail, is just to show you that if we talk about narratives, discourses, in particular related to agriculture, we can see that fundamentally we have been under two major scenarios. One has been rough and sustainable development, and the most recent one is sustainable development. This is being under discussion in the United Nations, but the United Nations is fundamentally an organization of nation states. So indigenous peoples are there in a sort of uncomfortable situation, but trying to make room for what I would call the different expressions of buen vivir, of living in harmony and plenitude, and in a whole complete different, because within the United Nations language and discourses, basically sustainable development comes as just changing the contents of the conversation, while in buen vivir, what changes is the terms of the conversation. So it is based on the indigenous philosophies, cosmologies, ontologies, epistemologies, and of course, the living languages of each and all indigenous cultures. In regards to Peru, we can see that I just want you to pay attention to what is under the circle to show you the importance of, small uh, farming agriculture, small family farming. And as you can see, in the period in the year of 1994, there were around 1,700,000 and something units. From that total, 1,290,000 were small units, agricultural units that had and have, around 5 hectares, and it's around 12 acres, more or less. But for the 2012, which is the last agricultural census, we see that the number has increased in terms of, a small family farming, which is very interesting because in most modern, countries, what you see is that family farming tends to narrow down and almost disappear, like in the case of the United States and probably Canada. And we have to pay attention to the uniqueness of the landscape of, the Andes, which is not just a flat Iowa kind terrain, right? So the Andes is a rugged, landscape, starting at 0 meters above sea level, going all the way up to 5,000 meters above sea level, and then going down to the oriental slope of the Andes, which I will present a little bit later. On the coastal side, we have, always, a little bit more of a small family farming compared to the larger units. In the Andes, we have, the highest concentration of, small scale agriculture, family farming. And then we have, on the jungle, a smaller amount. Basically, what makes up this small family farming is peasant communities and native communities, and I will explain that a little bit later. Just to show you that in terms or in numbers, we have peasant communities, 6,200 something, and native communities located in the jungle of Peru, 1,322. So a small percentage, as you can see, from the total of, agricultural units, just to show you that even though they are, a small percentage, they are the providers of daily food. They provide the food basket for the whole country. And this is a trend that also takes place all over Latin America and, around the world. So this is important to recognize, because in addition to that, you can also realize that it's not only about cultural diversity or agricultural diversity, but biological diversity. And that is done, with, indigenous agricultures in their own terms, although some of them have been exposed to modernization and the use of agricultural chemical inputs, as well as, the technological package and knowledge that comes with these innovations. So small family farming in Peru, 97% of the agricultural units employs 83% of agricultural workers, 95% of the agricultural surface, less than 20 hectares, and provides 70% of the food basket, and also participates in agro-export, in the agro-export sector. Basic data, we can see there, it's the indigenous population in Peru is around 7+ million people out of 30 million, a total of 30 million people, officially grouped in peasant communities, comunidades campesinas, and native communities, comunidades nativas. The first one located in the highlands, mainly, and partially on the coastal side, and the native communities are located in the jungle. This question, I always just read it and raise it for the end. Is the end of Euro-American Center modernity, pluriversity emerging, climate change and climate crisis, from university multi-pluriversity, from the monoethnic to the pluriethnic. I'm not going to get into this. I think that you are familiar with, the anthropocentric uh, let's say, profile that comes from the cosmology, cosmovision, philosophy, and theories related to the Western modernity. The anthropocosmic um, profile, it is related to indigenous peoples, cultures, uh, basically because it's another relationship with the world, which is opposite to the anthropocentric, and it's different too. Ancient Peru has been inhabited by many cultures, but there is one that it's is a very important one. It is the Caral civilization that happened around the 5,000 year before Christ, and it's older than the Greek civilization and the Aztec civilization, right? So this is just for you to keep in mind. Caral, again, is a major center of civilization in South America, and of course the other one is related to the Aztecs in Mesoamerica. And this long-term ancient occupation of the Andes was articulated at its summit with the Inca Confederation that took place during the last 300 years before the colonial invasion and colonization of the Andes. And it's called this articulation Capagnan, the Great Road, the Noble Path of Integration, the Path of Wisdom, 10,000 years old path, and 20,000 kilometers within Peru only. And in total, it's a system of roads of around 30,000 kilometers, including the neighboring countries, Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, Chile, and the northern part of Argentina. Again, this is just to show you very quickly, that the Aztecs in the north, in Mesoamerica, and the Caral are two major, points of ancient civilization compared to others, that are related to Africa, Asia, and so on. We need to revise, as I pointed out, the issue of cosmology and cosmovision, because they are two Western terms, two Western concepts, one underlining the logos, the noun, and the other the eyes, shattering all the other forms of expressing the experience of Pachamama, Mother Earth, which is the Quechua Aymara equivalent to the regional Greek cosmos and Latin universum. Aymara intellectuals talk about cosmo convivencia, cosmo with experience, that is the experience of the cosmos, vivencia, as well as living in harmony with the cosmos, convivencia, that is conviviality, and that has been highlighted by, among others, Walter Mignolo. So this is important because then we start to see that, we do not necessarily mean the same when we talk about cosmology and cosmovision in indigenous Aymara, Quechua, or for this matter, Amazonian indigenous terms. The West privileges the eye over all the senses in the language. It is the privilege of the noun, the thing. That is why Heidegger was able to write a long essay, What is the Thing? In the hypothetical case, thought experiment that Heidegger had been a speaker of Quechua, Aymara, or Nahuatl, he could not have written it because neither the language nor the cosmo experience would have suggested it, right? So cosmovision maintains the thing, the name, the thing, cuts all connection. Cosmo experience would be one that most closely captures the complexity of the extension relationships from top to bottom, to the left to the right, that are biologically constitutive of the organisms that move through the soil, the sky, and the water. That interrelationality and oneness that Clelia highlighted earlier before this presentation. In Peru, there is a beautiful possibility that can perhaps, with the coming, hopefully, government, uh, be implemented, because so far there has not been any coherent policy related to food, to indigenous food production, to indigenous agriculture, or, for this matter, indigenous education, and so on. So there are a number of documents that are in place, but they are not effective, and they are not legally or legally binding necessarily. So we have the Peruvian political constitution at the national level. We have international documents, UNTRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Convention on Biological Diversity, the International Labour Organization 169 Convention. The President of Peru has signed the law of free, prior, and informed consent, but nothing of that, is in effect and has been set into motion through special laws at the government level. So just for you to know that we continue, working in regards to, this particular issue, because we see that, if the indigenous sector is producing 70% of the food without any coherent support policy, agricultural policy from the state, what, else could be done if a coherent policy could support indigenous peoples in a more coherent endogenous way? So this incoherence has to do not only for the food issue production, because there are different stakeholders with goals and cognitive bases that are different. Research done in universities or think tank institutions or at the United Nations level, it is, basically using the techno-scientific approach, the modernity approach, the sustainability approach, if you want, right? But in their own terms, with their own cosmovision and cosmology, as I pointed out. State institutions are doing the same, and the business sector is doing more or less the same. So if you want to deal issues like multi-sectoral, intercultural, and systemic approaches to whatever, to climate change, to the pandemic, to agriculture, to food sufficiency, to education, basically then we have to recognize that there are at least, two different systems of knowledge in place that have to be, clarified when policies are implemented, because one size fits all has been mainly the way that the government has been implementing policies in regards to small farming and families' livelihoods. Just quickly here to show you that there are diverse knowledge systems which have different systems of validation. So the scientific system is just one of them. So, and we need to, these days to not only recognize that, but, see how they can be integrated, cross-fertilized, and, how co-production of knowledge can take place. Welcome or farewell to the Anthropocene. In the Andes, the consequences of colonization and Eurocentrism have been and still are negative. We Andeans began to measure our success by an index of modernity, which meant nothing other than how close our systems were to those of Europe. The West became our paradigm. No time or resources would be invested in developing or reproducing the methods of the indigenous world, considered the antithesis of development and modernization. A rich diversity of indigenous cultures The Andean population is around 17 million, including, the other countries besides Peru, neighboring countries. And then we move to part two, which is getting into the core of this presentation. So having that context in mind, already presented, what is the Pachacine? I coined this term, as something that goes in contrast with the Anthropocene, which is the human-made, environment that has been supported by science and technology and the Western cosmology and cosmovision. So basically, we will take a look at local community-based grassroots Andean cultural affirmation.
Can you, Tirso, disculpa que te moleste.
Yes.
Un momentito, just for clarification for everyone,
Yeah.
could you maybe quickly maybe say one thing or two about how you define Anthropocene?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Basically, it's a term that tries to characterize what happened since the Industrial Revolution, when capitalism was in full steam and started in England, and fundamentally it was based on science and technology, and behind that it was the Newtonian approach and of course the Cartesian approach. It's basically science and philosophy. There is a lot to say about that, but with that unfolded, through imperialism and colonialism spread around the world, this way of being related to nature, of uh, ways of knowing, ways of being, and ways of being related to the world. So, through time, what we have seen is that this, for the first time in human history, man, is, not co-evolving with what happened previously to this phenomena, but it is now changing the course of coevolution. And so that's why we are talking about climate crisis, because climate change has always happened. But, we are talking also about, the incoherence of how the economy is out of proportions, to the extent that in the past, economy was part of society, while today the economy, it is subsuming society. So economy should be just one variable in the equation. So that, in short, is what the Anthropocene is about. But there is a triumphant discourse that I heard, years ago, and there is a video that is called the Anthropocene. It's available in the internet, and fundamentally describes how, well, we made major mistakes. Science has spread and technology has, provided, a lot of benefits, which are undeniable, but the consequences are also, are undeniable at a larger scale, at a serious scale, that, now science is saying, well, we created the problem, but now we have the solution. And Einstein, coming from a whole different corner than Isaac Newton and, of course, Descartes, he is saying that, the mindset that created the problem is not part of the solution, right? So that is my word in regards to the Anthropocene. We can talk more if you want, a little bit later, but yes. Now we have. That's why I think that the time for, the indigenous matrix that deals with every possible corner of, what life is about at the visible and invisible level, uh, provides a better possibility for, besides what the best of science can provide. I'm talking about quantum science, which is closer to indigenous peoples' ways of, viewing the world. And then, we can realize that there is a whole different possibility that can procure balance and harmony. But I have some fears that the state is not going to be the one that is going to be leading this, but is at the local level through uh, learning to unlearn what was just a temporary presence and domination of Western ways of disciplining and educating people within the university, through the school system and beyond, right? So yes, I'm gonna move now, if you allow me, to the background information, basic profile of the Andes and the relevance of Andean indigenous peasants' sweet life. We have to realize that the indigenous languages have a whole different grasp in terms of what life is about and how it is expressed. Just one thing here. In the Western world, the individual, man, not women, are above nature, and nature is here to serve, the needs of men. In the indigenous world, uh, we all are one, and that has a word in Quechua, which is called no canchis, and in Aymara is called hiwasa, and these terms mean it is not me, it's about us. So that's why us means more than just the human community, as I will show you quickly. So, all right. So we already talked about, this cosmo-convivencia and conviviality, right? So these days, there is a phenomenon of unforeseen occurrence in the Andean countries. There is a pan-Andean movement about buen vivir, living well, that has gone beyond what it is Latin America as a whole. Europe, intellectuals, scholars are taking a look at it, right? So the affirmation of summa causae, cultural identity, and self-determination according to the indigenous peoples, cosmoconvivencia, conviviality, and its association with the territorial autonomies. A radical demand for cultural diversity. During the last 30 years in Peru, but not only in Peru, because I've been taking a look at Ecuador and Bolivia, there is an emerging Andean Amazonian indigenous paradigm of cultural affirmation, which we could call carefully indigenous endogenous development. Next generation, this is the next generation of indigenous rural projects. It's a time for synthesis, a systemic approach, and a scaling up, because for the last 30 years, it has been proved that productivity, the systemic matrix that I will show you, and the way of articulating cultural and biological diversity, and the cosmos view of indigenous peoples, it is more coherent and integrative. A strengthening of an endogenous culture sensitive matrix of endogenous development, it's important. So these days, our elders are saying that the origin of major local and global issues in contemporary Andean Amazonian communities, it's due to a generalized loss of respect among humans, towards nature, and towards deities and gods. Therefore, the message is we have to come back to respect. And here you have quickly, just, this rugged terrain of the Andes, the coastal region, and then different other altitudes that are, in native language, because this has been the way that, were known in the past and today also by indigenous peoples. And then, the oriental slope of the Andes. 82 of the planet's 103 life zones are concentrated in Peru. 8,000 years of Andean Amazonian cultural affirmation, and this is just, to show you the Andean Amazonian view of the landscape. Here, an experience that I'm not gonna go into detail, but it's showing you that around 21 indigenous local NGOs, basically have been implementing what I'm going to show you later about cultural affirmation in the Andes. And here you have a map of, cultural linguistic diversity being Quechua and, Aymara, the two most largest linguistic groups, and then the rich diversity of the Andes, of the Amazonian basin. So what informs this, present and past and hopefully future um, indigenous agricultures? Why do I say agricultures? Because fundamentally, even today, despite the fact that we have indigenous populations located in a significant percentage in the urban side, uh, agriculture is the center of life for Andean indigenous peoples, even for those who have, moved to the cities. Why? Because they are still connected with the, local rural communities and families and parents and relatives, and because they celebrate wherever they are, the different festivities related to the agricultural calendar. And basically here you have what informs, basically life, agrocentric life in the Andes. So it is important to say that whatever happens at the macro level happens at, the micro level. Whatever happens at the macrocosms, it is also happening at the microcosm level. So that is the interconnection, that is the unity, that is the oneness, right? So yeah, basically that is a quick picture to then develop this uh, abstraction, which is related to place as opposed to placelessness, which is, mainly, carried out by capitalism and the way that appropriates uh, the lands of indigenous peoples around the world. So place and the Andean cosmovision are very important. And the place par excellence in Andean life is the chakra. And the chakra is a small plot of land, less of 5 hectares. And the chakra is not just a piece of land; it is a series of pieces of land located at different altitudes, because that is the strategy in order to produce food, in order to deal with risk. And risk is a daily phenomenon in the Andes, because weather changes abruptly, because the way that different elements interact with agriculture. So in the chakra, it's the place of interaction of the communities of the Salja, or nature, the communities of runas, or human beings, and the community of huacas and deities, which are related to the spiritual side. And there is a dialogue of these three communities, which are no one is more than the other, because they are equivalent, relatives, not blood, relatives, but relatives in a larger, different sense. Dialogue, reciprocity, redistribution, and rejoice takes place among these communities within the chakra, and everything is always variable, harmonious, is animated, sacred, consubstantial, immanent, and diverse. So that is the cosmological framework that it's being used by people in the Andes. And as I'm gonna show you why, the Andean cosmovision, another way of showing the three communities, one more way to hammer the idea of what the Andes is about. And then, on the knowledge regenerated in the Andean experience, the Pacha-centric approach. So it is based, as I pointed out earlier, on the worldview, the Andean worldview, the philosophical Andean view, the theoretical Andean view, and so on. And all of these, is what supports cultural affirmation in order to deal with food sufficiency, biodiversity, in situ conservation, harvesting of water, climate change, you name the issue, education, uh, whatever has to be dealt with, that is the frame. And fundamentally, this emerging Andean endogenous paradigm is in order to nurture the local pacha, those three communities. Nothing is left, because the three communities are taken into account, nurturing the IU's organicity. The IU is all of this integration of the macrocosmos, because we have to be related to the different stars in order to know the moon, the sun, the constellations, and so on, in order to nurture and procure balance and harmony within the chakra and through the chakra to the universe. Strengthening rituals and festivities is another level, which it's important within the endogenous paradigm, and strengthening the regional spaces, the seed paths, where the seed diversity and the knowledge and saberes regenerate. How it is all, how each of these levels are done, it is number one, through community work, different ways of working, in the Andean indigenous way. The second one is through the nurturance of traditional authorities, recovering respect and love for the deities, and visits among indigenous peasants. So this is the thread that is being built up, and this is clearer and more visible within this matrix, right? So whatever is the altitude, you can be on the coastal side at certain levels, before, the high snow mountains, or on the other side of the Amazonia. Basically there are specific dimensions that you can have to consider, and depending on the issue, you will see what needs to be done. So this is a sort of matrix done with simplicity, but there is a lot of complexity behind the matrix, as I try to suggest, with the cosmovision behind, and with the work that is being shown in part. So lots of things to say, because there is enough material. I didn't show you here the agricultural calendar, how life runs through each month, through the dry season and the rainy season, and how complex all of this is, and how the recognition that, if, as I pointed out, there are around 1,700 native communities or indigenous communities in Peru, for each one at least there is an agricultural calendar that is unique and specific. But this can be multiplied to the extent that, if we deal with agriculture, we have to deal with potatoes, we have to deal with different crops, corn, we have to deal with different animals. Therefore, the agricultural calendar grows in complexity. And for that, human beings, indigenous peoples in the Andes and the Amazon, have to be well aware, knowledgeable of, the complexity of the world. And for that, it's, all of these expansion of what the Western world has been reducing in terms of who we really are, how, we know that we know that we think we know, right? So that's why in the Andes, it is important to have, among other things, besides the agrarian agricultural policies that have been so incoherent so far, we need to pay attention to what in let's say North America, we have indigenous Native American studies, we have associations related to that, we have scholars, we have intellectuals, we have universities opening up to this possibility with some constraints, though I hope that this will change through time. But yes, in Latin America, we don't have yet, I have been one of the proponents that we should have something similar, and at the same time different than what has been created in North America in regards to indigenous and Native American studies. We need indigenous Mesoamerican studies. We need indigenous Andean, Amazonian studies, right? So the lessons and implications are, I think that, they come as a sort of default for governments, think tank institutions that have been taking a look at their, there is an expression that right now, I don't have the word they have been taking a look at their belly, right? So, and or they have been taking a look at, the universe through the eye of the keyhole, right? And we need to open the door and see that there is much more. And for that matter, I think that indigenous peoples are better positioned, and they will be much better positioned as we strengthen and nurture and invigorate these indigenous cultures. Yes, the private sector needs to learn too. I think that, this is a whole revolution, not Western style, the indigenous style. So yes, I think that I'm gonna leave it up here just by saying what Aymaras say. May we all go together, may no one be left behind, may we all have what we need, and may no one lack anything. Let's wake up. Hug Umaya, one mind. Hug Makia, one action. Hug Sonkoya, one heart. Hug Kalpaya, one fist. Hug Ayu, one people. So yes, that's what we need. I think that in regards to food sufficiency, education, there is much, much more to say, because we are still dealing with oral cultures in the Andes and in the Amazon. So we need other ways of innovating and creating these processes of cultural affirmation and decolonization. Grow everything in order to eat everything among all of us, the three communities, the community of humans, of nature, and the community of deities and gods. That is, what food sufficiency is about in the Andes. I would stop here so we can have time for, some conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tirso. I'm gonna give you hands of applause. I'm gonna okay, let's see. We're still see your screen. Wait, oh no, you have to disconnect it from your side. Okay, so I'm sure that you gave all of us a lot to think about, and I'm just gonna open up the floor because I know that this group is just gonna ask you anyway, so the floor is open.
I have a question for Tirso.
All right.
I mean, I have 100 questions, but I can't take everybody's time.
Well, synthesize.
What happens? What happens when indigenous people's philosophy and way of being and way of thinking and way of living is co-opted by politics?
In short, is to be who you are not.
Unfortunately, I see that happening all over the Andes. Where people's sovereignty, people's philosophy, people's way of living is not being practiced, but is being used in theory. And I hurt for that. It hurts me.
Yes and no, because we can see things from different sides. If we take a look at the state side, that's one level of action. At the local level, definitely something different is happening. In Mexico, it's happening in, I'm not too familiar with Central America, but I know that, there are leaders there in Ecuador, aside from the state, which made a misuse of the term buen vivir, and try to, co-opt this term through Western categories. It is the worst that you can do. That's why, we have to strengthen our ways, our languages, and all that you pointed out in terms of ontologies, cosmologies, cosmovisions, philosophies, epistemologies, and so on. So at the local level, there is autonomy, despite the fact that we live within the borders of the nation state. And you take advantage of every possible space that is left. For instance, this happened. We have to remember that in Peru in particular, but I think that also in Bolivia as well as in Ecuador, indigenous autonomy today is stronger than in the past. And we have to bring into the scene the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because there you have a document that has been subscribed and signed by all nation states, recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples, right? So, and the issue of autonomy, the issue of, your right to determine not only who you are, but the type of education that you want, it's, unfolding at the local level. I can name all of these 21 examples of indigenous communities, NGOs within communities that have produced, without exaggeration, they have produced at least 100 publications, solid ones in their own terms. They have produced a series of videotapes. They continuously are strengthening the different ways, the indigenous ways, through the agricultural calendar, because they are reconnecting not only within their communities, but among other communities. That is the beauty that we don't see from above the state. Strategies of harvesting of water. 100 lagoons made with full indigenous participation, knowledge, technologies, etc., 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 have been done in one community that has been teaching other communities how to capture water. And with that comes change, because with water comes life, right? And it's incredible because this has happened during the last 10 years. So just to say that yes and no to what you said. Definitely, there is much more to do to the point that indigenous communities, I would say that Bolivia is in a better position. I'm not saying that it's paradise, but Bolivia has moved into something that now is gonna shape the state too. And indigenous communities are gonna have to, work more and more, as it is showing. I'm not endorsing or giving a blank check to the Bolivian government or to the nation state in Bolivia. But what I see in Bolivia, I don't see it here. And what I see here is the most terrible thing these days, because we are in presidential elections, second round, with a low level participation and with two opposing views that are Eurocentric. One that is related to the countryside, one that is peasant and has been trained through the unions, Western ways of fighting, it's not bad, through the Eurocentric view of the world. And the other candidate is the opposite side of the coin, but Eurocentric anyway, which is proposing neoliberalism, the same model, which excludes no redistribution, just, the same old thing for the last 200 years, right? With some variations, of course.
So you gave me some hope, because what I read is a lot of international mining companies, most of them from Canada, in Peru and in Bolivia. And now I see a new form of neoliberalism, which comes from China and Russia,
Yes.
intervening with natural resources, where indigenous peoples are not having participation in the, they're not having participation in the decisions of,
Right.
of how these resources are going to be extracted, and who's going to benefit. But thank you. I want to leave the floor for other people,
Sure.
but there's a lot to talk. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you, Tirso, for your presentation. I feel energized, inspired, and affirmed by the things you said, all of the information you provided to us. And I feel curious from a place of love, and not from a place of like critique, but from a place of love. Because I read Lorena Cabnal, who's a Maya Xinca community feminist from Ishimuleu, Guatemala. And I added the link to her piece on community feminism. And in that piece, she talks about el patriarcado ancestral, the ancestral patriarchy. And then she kind of starts critiquing Sumak Kasai. And she basically says that el Sumak Kasai es una construcción cosmogónica masculina. Además, la mayoría de exponentes y pregoneros del movimiento indígena, del paradigma en la actualidad, con propiedad y autoridad epistemológica, son hombres. So she's like, basically saying that, she's basically asking, right, how did indigenous cosmologies such as Sumak Kasai come into to kind of being at the top of the list of cosmologies and ways of being, knowing, and thinking, when she's basically saying that prior to colonization, men were already being engaging in a power over type of relationship over the bodies of women and over the knowledges of women. And that therefore, in her analysis, Sumak Kasai, it's kind of makes her wonder who kind of, came up with it. Y pregunto, because, I'm really curious, and I was about to, one day write a poem about Sumak Kasai, and then I was like, wait, maybe I shouldn't write about it because, so it's, I'm confused and curious, and I'm very open to what you have to say about it. Thank you.
I think that you have highlighted an area that needs a lot of thought and heart by all of us, those who live within the communities and outside the communities. I would like to bring the past to the present. In Peru, throughout the last, let's say 15, 20 years, archaeology is showing that top authorities have been women, right? And we have at least 3 or 4, sites that show that these women were, in power, and they have, all the characteristics in order to guide, the community, to inform the community, to plan, the rituals and so on. We are living a different time. We are not going back. But there are elements from the Andean cosmovision that cannot be thrown, as we say, throw the baby together with the water, right? So a lot of work needs to be done there, because I agree with you, but those who are working within the local communities have the first voice. And I think that, Eva Copa in El Alto, Bolivia, these days, is showing who, is exercising leadership, right? What kind of fresh air is bringing into politics. So yeah, there is a lot of work to do there. I encourage you to, you know, continue working what you're saying. Yes, and in regards to the issue of the nation state, the nation, as I said, the nation state. How can the nation state decolonize itself? That's the major point. Number one. So, and there are scholars who are saying that the nation state is coming to an end. So, a different forms of politics within the territory has to happen. That's number one. The issue of China and, you know, the US, westernization, de-westernization, fighting for, you know, a piece of the pie and control at the geopolitical level. That is not the scenario for indigenous peoples. The third scenario is something similar or better than Buen Vivir, but from the indigenous way of knowing, way of being, and way of being related to the world. Now, if you take a look at, and with this I will finish, if you take a look at, you know, all the ceramics and the different expressions of art, you know, language in the Andes was multiversal. It was not just oral. It was through textiles. It was through ceramics. It was through chants. So, you know, it was through architecture, right? So that's why we cannot throw, you know, because the question is how the Andean ancient matrix allowed that integration and that, you know, balance expression, you know. So we need to pay attention to that. And for that, it's difficult because what are the sources for that? You have to reread whatever is still visible, you know, in terms of the architecture. I will send you websites. There are people who are doing that. Again, concepts, aesthetics as cosmology and cosmovision in Western terms was clouding what existed before with aesthesis. Because with aesthetics, what came into place was, this is the way of viewing art and we know what art is about, right? Same for the social sciences, the way that we know, what we know that we think we know. The same for humanities, the same for economy, the same for politics, right? Learning to unlearn. Same for education. Same for food production. What's going on, you know? I mean, when technicians and experts, as opposed to imperts, were brought through the North Carolina mission and the Iowa mission by the Peruvian government with support of the US government and embassy to Peru in the late 1950s or early 60s, what did they say? Based on their lenses, they were thinking that they were in Iowa, right? Oh, Peru, its vocation as a country is mining. That's what they said, not agriculture. And you know where mining is located? Mining is underneath the lands of indigenous local communities who produce the food for the whole country, right? So I'm not against mining. I think that, you know, we need to pay attention to that too, right? So, but, you know, the way that the Peruvian government is, the Peruvian government is a model that is outdated. It is mainly agro-primary export oriented. That means we only base our future in terms of mining and the revenues coming from that. We don't care, you know, if they take 80 to 70 or 90% of the surplus, just leave us something, right? And while with all the contradictions, the Evo government, Evo Morales government was saying 70-30, 70-30, a whole different model. And with more room to do more things as the people push the agenda and say, let's move forward, right? So I'm overextending here, but
Hi, Judy here.
hello.
I didn't raise my hand. I just jumped in. Number one, I am just so, my eyes have been opened so much this evening. Thank you so much. Mine is kind of an agricultural comment. So I'm from Prince Edward Island, and we produce a lot of potatoes. And so to talk about that 70% of the food basket is produced by indigenous farmers, I believe, with 20-acre farms. A hectare, was it, or 60?
No, basically up to a maximum of 20 hectares.
Maximum.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of thinking that one through, because on Prince Edward Island in the last 30 years, oh my goodness, we used to have the nice family farms with mixed farming, maybe 100 acres. Now, like, it's a field of potatoes is 100-acre field, huge fields, so that the big industrial tractors can get through. And the result is, like, because Prince Edward Island is very windy, those big fields there, like, it's huge for erosion and drifts, like the big wind and pesticides and so forth. So my goodness, I'm going to have to read more about potatoes in Peru, because it's fascinating. The whole evening is fascinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We have more than 4,000 potato varieties, but you see, the Andes is a very challenging territory, landscape, weather changes, within the same latitude a lot. And most of agriculture in the Andes is rain-based agriculture. So you have to know very well and read everything that is around you in order to know. That's why we call dialogue. That is nurturing, because you are awake. You are taking a look at the insects, the droppings of this, the nesting of that, the rising levels of the water, the kind of smell of the rain, of the wind, That is something that we have lost with colonization temporarily, because we can recover that. I can tell you that because I am in the mecca of spirituality, let's put it that way, India, right? Modernity made an inroad with British colonization and then Bill Gates colonization. Vandana Shiva has written extensively about that. I asked Vandana Shiva, why indigenous agricultures are not being taught within universities? I have the video for you. And she told me, short and nice, because the moment that is being taught, the whole building is gonna crumble. And this is not just a poetic, expression. When we change to our real nature, which is oneness, non-duality, even Eurocentric dominant Europe is gonna be happier after a long time. After a long time of suffering, those brothers and sisters in that part of the world, right? Because we continue not being who we really are. And who we really are is what ancient philosophies like Vedic philosophies, Advaita philosophies, Aztec philosophies, Karal philosophies are like dormant seeds to some extent, waiting to wake up, because that is the beauty of the seed that we have within. And you may feel now what I'm going to say that is kind of new age, but it is not. We are longing for our divinity. We are, inquiring, and we don't know how to. I put myself in that path because rationality takes us in the wrong way. Because our egos pretend that through mind we will resolve whatever comes to as a problem. Take a look at Advaita philosophies. Now we have people that are mushrooming slowly. The seeds are waking up. I'm listening to a Venezuelan who is in Thailand, who is talking about these things better than me. Through experience, not through books, not by going to the university. I have nothing against the university. It will go its own process, right? A Venezuelan woman living in Chile talking about the same. And then I listened to some wise amautas, knowledgeable people in my country who are telling me more or less the same. So we cannot disregard ancient ways of knowing, being, and being related to the world. Let's make better than what they did. Because today, in Peru, our politicians, society, and most of the people, including myself, we are not even at the level of the soil of the sandals or the foot of ancient Peruvians. We are not. And that is serious.
Shali, you're next.
Clelia, and thank you so much for this just encounter. I'm like, my mind is going in 1,000 different rhizomatic, mycorrhizal ways, but I don't even know. I don't want to take up all the time, but I'm really thankful that you mentioned aesthesis as kind of like the decolonization of sense perception. In that sense, like I feel like we're trapped in a regime of perception that is entirely aesthetic. And you get like kind of like the extreme of that with fascism, right? So I mean, this is something that I deal with a lot in the arts, but this is also connected to kind of like the rumination that I want to put forth, which is Walter Mignolo kind of like develops kind of like an analysis or a critique of this. But at the same time, I've been reading Kusikanki's response to kind of like Mignolo's circle that is kind of meta-gentrifying in a Latino way, like knowledge by indigenous people and artists, and basically doing kind of the same as the global North is doing, but in a Latino way, like quote unquote. And it's a club, and it's and this is why I feel like it's important to mention maybe intra-relations in terms of class and availability and elitism. Like I worry that sometimes we tend to reproduce these same hierarchical exclusions that are very much predicated on colonial thinking, and this is something that, for example, like Quijano critiques in his with his notion of the coloniality, but many times, like I mean, that's just one way of saying it, like but it's kind of like the residue, like the la colonialidad. It's a mode of being that pervades, like it's still there, even though, we might change the symbolic realm. We might change this isn't invading, it's bringing freedom or whatever, like it's just lies. But I'm really interested in the decolonization aesthetics in that sense, you know? How can we like, I'm as an artist, I'm very much concerned with developing exercises for developing perception in a way that's not reduced to linearity, reduced to one single, you know, authority of knowledge and so forth. So I don't know, like if you have something to say about this, I would really be thankful, and thank you for your time.
No, thank you. In reality, while you were talking, I read Pacha Mamones. Well, one thing for sure is that I am not an authorized voice at all on anything, okay? I am sharing just my experience and my path with you. These days, I am a deep professionalized intellectual, okay? So I told Walter Mignolo, with all due respect, because I appreciate a number of things that I have learned from them, as well as from each of you, right? And I told him, I'm not quite sure about, you know, this approach. And for certain things, I am leaning heavier towards non-duality, Advaita-like, Andean-like, because I find there, I'm gonna synthesize this. Number one, Elvira Espejo Ayca, a Bolivian, Quechua, Aymara, indigenous woman from Oruro, Potosí, member of a community there. The current director for more than 8 years of the Museum of Ethno something and Anthropology in La Paz, Bolivia. We invited her through the Andean Science Group to talk. The recorded version is available, but we are going to invite her again because she was talking about museums and the way that, you know, she is envisioning and working about museums, which is not the Western way, of course, and which is not her project because she is just the voice of other voices. So that's number one. And I would say that we need, the second point is this one. You know what? I think that we could iron out a lot of things quicker and allocate time and energy and love for simplicity and through simplicity. What I want for you meaning whatever is visible or invisible, I want it for me. That, you know, synthesizes within an atom the whole universe for me. What I want for you, visible and invisible, at the micro and macro cosmos level, I want it for me. If every president in the world, if every politician in the world, if every citizen in the world would say, hey, why don't we think about this? Why don't we put our minds and hearts towards this? Let's forget about, the concepts that, you know, we have in terms of doing this and that. Let's forget for a little while. And let's move towards, you know, how can we do within our localities? Place is important. Within our places, within our families, within ourselves, right? That what I want for me, I want it for everybody. The whole Library of Congress could be summed up, and there is a lot of room yet for saying, I think that we should explore at least, you know, let's give it, you know, a semester to think about that. Right? You know, because I don't want to get involved in theories that I was chewing and chewing and chewing through 30 years of my life or more, and within doctoral studies, master studies, and so on. When I moved to the other side of the river, indigenous studies, I started to see some of the possibilities. And when I left indigenous studies, I saw some other options for me that are not related to the university. I'm a free man to some extent. Now I do what I want to some extent, right? I don't need to serve to any discipline. Okay, I don't have to depend on, you know, tenure in order to conform to certain authorities and majorities within my department, including indigenous and non-indigenous peoples. We need freedom. The university was about freedom. It was. Now it's about business, especially neoliberal universities. This is my point of view. I'm not saying this is the way, right? But at some point we can intersect. What I want for you is what I want for me. What you want for me is what you want for you. Let's make it simple. A Marxist, when I was taking the first course of Marxist theory in Wisconsin-Madison, said an expression, traveling light. Traveling light. You know how crazy I became by reading all those Western theories about development and modernization through my doctoral studies that had no sense for the reality of neither of them, nor for, you know, the global South. And here we are saying, oh, wait, there is one theory coming through sustainability, and the United Nations is leading the path. Right? Oh, yeah, you go ahead. You know what? I'm going to go in a different direction. I've been there. I've been physically and through readings. And my respect to everybody who can teach me. But I don't want to go through the same process again. Yeah, no, it's in all honesty, you know, let's recover our freedom, our independence, our autonomy of thinking, feeling.
Okay, I have a question
Oh,
that is kind of.
Hold on, Gloria. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to interrupt. I saw Meryl's had her hand up. Go ahead, Meryl.
Okay.
You can connect, Gloria. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to, first of all, just say how grateful I am to be here in this space with so many open-minded, mind-blowing people. My question is actually for Tirso about your about the role of spiritualism and deities. I study shamanism, and I'm wondering if you could speak to how spiritual ritual can help wake up those dormant seeds of indigenous knowledge, as you were mentioning.
You know what? It can be done through shamanism and without shamanism. The issue is who we have right next to us, so we are not qualified as psychotic, but as waking up to our consciousness, to our real consciousness. You know, and that it's been shown through few people that I happen to know, right? So spirituality is, you know, the path to who we always are, have been, and will be, right? And that was the path that was closer and was walked by indigenous peoples more than, including European peoples at some point, before and after the dominance of the Western cognitive imperialistic way, right? Because even China these days knows that they are not going to go through the same river of modernization. Now, the debate is ongoing. The debate is taking place. What debate? That you will need 3 more Earths in order to, do what the Western world did, right? So, number 1. Number 2, the Western world is anemic of deep philosophies, despite the fact that there are some interesting, important philosophers like Heidegger, who some people just put down this guy because he was associated with fascism, right? Okay, but what about Asia? Asia is in a way pragmatic as opposed to, let's say, Latin America. Asia has a different spiritual, philosophical background than the Western world. Balance, harmony, it doesn't go away through 2, 3 generations. Same thing for the Andes, right? But we need to strengthen them. That's why the nation state is under question. The university is under question. Spirituality is when you are who you are. And that is when you move out the curtain of the ego and the mind, who are distracting you like the dog running behind its tail, pretending that one day you will catch the tail. And so far, 500 years. You want 5 more 100 years of running behind your tail? I don't want it. That's why I decided that I'm going towards what you are saying. I do not intellectualize, but it's another language. It's another way of, being. It's and you can grasp things better. Complex things. Like, there is a film, I don't remember the name of the film, of an Indian young boy who went to, a temple. And while being in the temple, he was inspired and he started to write formulas on, the floor, right? And for some accidents in life or whatever coincidence, then he was invited to go to England because he was special, but he couldn't prove through the scientific method what he showed to the professors. And the professors were saying, this is not valid until you prove it our way. That is what we cannot continue doing. That's why I was talking to you about different knowledge systems with different validation systems. That's why whatever the government, has, if it's gonna exist, at least follow the path of Bolivia or do something better than that, right? These are just quick, thoughts. I'm on the same side like you, no more, no less. I am just, thinking like what you're doing.
Gloria?
Okay, so first of all, I want to be very thankful to like the new mindset that is opening up right now, because I was familiar with like linguistic imperialism, but not cognitive. So that's like you mentioned it, and I was like, okay, everything is making sense now. But also, I have like not exactly a question, but a concern about the co-opting of Buen Vivir to transform it into something that validates like nation state funding and planning, because I just read that in Mexico right now there is a program, a government funded program called Sembrando Vida, which is supposedly based on Buen Vivir. And they even credit like Andean philosophy at the origin, and they credit the Zapatistas for speaking about it in Mexico. But then when you look into the program that is supposedly Buen Vivir, they have like a series of requirements to receive funding from the government. And like the very first step is training, capacitación, which does not sound to me like they're valuing the knowledge that the people already have in like working in the field. And then there's like a series of requirements of production that your field, your little parcela needs to have to be to qualify for this apoyo, for this funding. So how do we like react to that? How do we keep that from happening? Or how, like, what tool do we have to stop this kind of like co-opting and like misrepresenting what Buen Vivir is or should be?
Well, I it's too much to ask me for, an answer, but everything comes, in time. Everything comes in time, when you don't have expectations, right? Because we want to change things, right? Oh, what I have been trained in sociology, was to look at things like as a problem. And I was the expert and I have the authorized voice. That pattern has not been erased from technocrats, bureaucrats, from, government people, because they are in a chain of command, right? And most of them very well educated within the system of education within the country or outside the country, right? Medicine, agriculture, everything, is like a big avenue, but if you see through the keyhole of the eye of the keyhole, right, you will just see what it is possible. But when you open the door, you can say, oh, this is more. This is what I couldn't see. And there are very few people in government at the regional, even local level, because you know what, it's a struggle. When I see all of that, I said, wow, no, you have to find your community. In a way, those communities exist in Peru, in Bolivia, right? In Mexico, as far as I know, for instance, Universidad de la Tierra, right? Gustavo Esteva, no? Who I happen to know in 1995 when I was starting to write my dissertation, and I said, I want to write about the seed, what the seed is about in Mexico. The commercial seed and the native seed. And he told me that it's impossible. And then I moved to Peru. And in Peru, I was received open arms, and they nurtured me, and they showed me that I could learn in a different way, beyond what American universities, most of them, do. And when I read a master thesis from a peasant that I happen to know well, a friend of mine, I was crying about what I was reading, because I didn't have to memorize anything. I was feeling it, because it was like if she was dealing with, she was dealing with a relative. And in the Andes, you don't treat relatives, like in the formal way. You treat with love, like when you are in love with somebody, with your dog, with your cat, with whoever. What do? You provide the best face, energy, dialogue, gestures, and for the plant, that means the best light, the best soil, close to your house, right? Water, taking a look at, this relative on a frequent basis. You do that when you are in love, right? That's what we're missing.
Dice mi abuelita que el que solo se reía de sus maldades se acordaba. Dijiste love, right? Te reíste.
Because I've been processing my own things.
Ah!
Of course. Well, I'm towards, I am going towards divinity, but, it's not outward, it's inward, right? And even that expression, because if you read the Rig Veda, the creation of, the universe, the one breath without breathing, and then, the one is what sustains everything. So it is not this guy named Tirso who happened to, be Peruvian or was born in a locality that has a biography, that, has a lot of memories, good and bad. I am not that, but it has to come as a practice. Forget about the past, because that doesn't exist, right? But those philosophies are not being taught as a way of life in our families. Most of us are not being taught at the university or the school. Most of them are not practiced by the majority of us. So what do we expect? Ego, Eurocentric politics, ways of life, of thinking, of being, and being related to the world. I'm not gonna get into the issue of gender, because even friends of mine who are more knowledgeable and wiser, they are, it's like a hot potato. But you guys, I hope that you can be the synthesizers, right? Because we are at a moment of synthesis more than anything else. We have enough knowledge. We know enough as to start to say, moving the wheat from the shaft. not going through the keyhole, but opening the door and experiencing. Don't make your head grow exponentially, because then you're going to lose balance, right? We are already starting to lose balance because we are right. Yeah, well, I'm sorry that I'm not too academic these days.
Tirso, mira, te voy a pegar con la chancleta ancestral, que todo lo sabe, todo lo puede. Chancleta
No,
power.
yeah, no, it's great to be with this circle of sharing, because honestly, the pandemic has made me move towards uh, an inward, work. And yeah, that is what is going on. I'm just sharing hints, bra, how do you say, brochazos, uh, from things that to some extent I am having some uh, awake, awake, awakening. Because I can tell you two things quickly. Number one, when I was in Canada, suddenly I felt in the basement of a house a light and a warm sensation that was filling me of peace. Peace that made me feel you need nothing else. This is all that you need. And then in a ceremony with ayahuasca, that from here started to emerge and vibrate and move something that I couldn't retain for myself, egotistically, right? Like, oh, this is so good that it's just for me. No, it came naturally that I wanted to spread this, and I wanted to go as far as possible to the infinite. And you know what somebody told me recently? That's who you are. Anchored there, anchored there. Because that's what we are. And it comes, it's telling you, I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting. I've been with you the whole time, since time immemorial. I am timeless, spaceless, omniscient, omnipotent, transcendent. I am unborn. That's what I am. Of course, we experiment what human nature is about in this tri-dimensional way that is so dominant. It's like a jail. I have a name. I am an authority. I live in this neighborhood. I use these Nikes. I. If you ask a Buddhist two things, who are you and where you come from, it will take some time for this person to answer. Right? But we, those who are in modernity, oh, my name is Tirso, and I have a PhD and two, postdocs, and I'm an expert on this. Who are you? Yeah, we need to come back to balance. That's what I'm telling me. I'm sharing that with you.
Well, thank you for your presence, Tirso. Thank you for everyone's presence. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for listening. for tuning in, for allowing yourselves to other possibilities during these very predictable, dangerous, and urgent times. I'm sure that we all feel grateful for Tirso and him being with us this evening. And if you want to conclude, Tirso, with just maybe a couple of, maybe un consejo that kind of like embraces some of the elements that we're holding on to: fire, earth, water, and air. Yeah.
Well, let me see if I can quickly share with you something that I read after a long time to a friend. Let me see if I can get it quickly here. Yeah, it's here. This is in Spanish, so I'm not going to be able to translate it clearly, but
you can say it in Spanish. I will not translate it. I will translate it in the follow-up email that I usually
yes.
share with everyone.
Yeah, I will send it to you because it's a couple of
okay.
Somos los viajeros de una travesía cósmica, polvo de estrellas danzando y girando las corrientes y los torbellinos del infinito. La vida es eterna, pero las expresiones de la vida son efímeras, momentáneas, transitorias. Siddhartha Gautama el Buda dijo una vez: esta existencia nuestra es tan transitoria como las nubes del otoño. Observar el nacimiento y la muerte de los seres es como mirar los movimientos de una danza. Una vida es como un relámpago en el cielo que se desliza veloz como un torrente por la pendiente de una montaña. Y luego otra persona dice: nos hemos detenido momentáneamente para encontrarnos unos a otros, para conocernos, amarnos y compartir. Este es un momento precioso, pero transitorio. Es un pequeño paréntesis en la eternidad. Si compartimos con cariño, alegría y amor, crearemos abundancia y alegría para todos. Y entonces este momento habrá valido la pena. La última expresión es lo que dijo David Choquehuanca, vicepresidente de Bolivia. Dijo: volver a ser Larama, recuperar nuestro Larama, ser rebeldes con sabiduría. Ser rebeldes con sabiduría. Sabiduría viene de saber. Let's be rebels with wisdom. And wisdom comes from the Latin root sapere. And sapere means tasting. And tasting involves your full body. That's what wisdom comes from. Involving your full body, because every possible cell in your body cooperates towards balance and harmony. And that is called, in medical terms, homeostasis, as opposed to apoptosis, chaos, death, disorder. And because this is a game and we are just passing by. Let's do the best game. I appreciate more than my words can say being part of this meeting. We all are the same.
I'll see you all in 15 minutes at 7:35. Besitos, Tirso.
Gracias. Chao.
I'll see you in the bottle.
All right.
Te veo.
Gracias, Tirso.
Gracias. Gracias a ustedes. Thank you to you all. The visible and invisible ones.
I will see you all back at 7:35, and Tirso, I will send you an email with details for the party that we're going to have on June 17th.
All right. All right. I'll keep my eyes open. Bye.
Ciao, Tirso. See you all at 7:35.
Yes, 7:35.